This webinar is going to be recorded, so you should get a pop-up menu, and you should please say okay. We're also going to be posting this on our YouTube channel, so please remember to stay muted during the webinar, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. One of our staff members will be grabbing questions from the chat, so feel free to drop them in anytime throughout the presentation, and we're going to be addressing those in the question and answer session. So our agenda for today, for this evening's program, we're going to introduce you to New Jersey LCV, for those of you who are unfamiliar with our organization, and provide some quick background on what 100% clean electricity standard is and what the 2035 goal means for our state, introduce and discuss the topic with our amazing panelists that are here with us tonight. And then we're going to leave about 10 to 15 minutes, probably a little bit more, for questions and answers, really the questions from you all and the answers from our experts that are with us today to address those. So first, let me just start out by thanking our panelists: Eric Miller from the Natural Resources Defense Council, Dr. Barbara Blumenthal from the New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and Nicole Miller of the New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition and M&M Consulting. We're going to hear more from each of these folks later, but I just want to extend my sincere appreciation for all the work they do to make New Jersey more sustainable, cleaner, and better for our children and grandchildren. Clean energy is a key piece of how we're going to protect our natural beauty and the beautiful open spaces that we have, and really clean up our air to make us healthier. And of course, there are other really excellent job opportunities, good high-paying jobs in the clean energy marketplace. So with that, I also want to thank our longtime supporters, to all the folks that have been able to work with us over the years for coming out tonight. New Jersey LCV is a bipartisan nonprofit, and we work to ensure that our clean air and water and high-quality open spaces are accessible to everyone in our state. Each legislative season, we're bringing together a diverse cross-section of New Jersey conservation leaders, and we survey our members, and we form something called the Common Agenda for the Environment, and that reflects policy priorities that are shared across New Jersey's environmental community. And one of our top priorities in this legislative session, which is 2 years, so we just finished up year one, and we're in the second year of the legislative session, will be to require 100% clean electricity from renewable energy sources by 2035, along with strong commitments to reduce pollution in our overburdened communities. This goal will put New Jersey at the forefront of the fight against climate change, and it is the nation-leading commitment for clean electricity. So I also want to thank our co-sponsors, the following organizations who helped put this webinar together and are sharing this with their members. And if you're from one of these organizations or learned about it from one of these organizations, these are great folks to continue to put your trust in and work alongside of. This work is hard and important. The Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions, New Jersey Conservation Foundation, the New Jersey Highlands Coalition, the New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition, Highlands Preservation Alliance, and Rethink Energy NJ. Again, if you're just joining us, if you could please make sure your name aligns with who you are, and you can change your name with the 3 dots next to your picture or in the bottom. Usually that appears there. Sometimes there's 3 dots on the side and a menu opens up. We're going to start out just kind of giving you an overview, and that's partly my job before we hear from our esteemed panel. So what is a CES, or what we call a clean electricity standard? You're probably here at least partially because you want to understand what a clean energy standard is and how it works. So to put it simply, a clean electricity standard is a mechanism that supports the growth of clean electricity generation, even as our demand grows. So you'll see from the presentation tonight exactly how that plays out. It revises the state's renewable energy portfolio standard and requires that electricity generation comes from clean sources at a growing percentage over time, and that our electricity is 100% clean by 2035. So the chart on the right shows the 2019 Energy Master Plan goals of reaching 100% clean energy by 2050, and the probable mix of renewable energy and nuclear energy sources we would utilize to reach it. It does this by requiring each electricity provider to purchase a mix between in-state and out-of-state renewable energy credits, allowing for a mix that helps us balance the creation of good paying local jobs in state with affordable renewable energy from competitive regional markets. And this helps drive down the costs. The intergovernmental and other statewide agencies have vocalized support for cleaning up our electricity sector through a clean electricity standard. And just by way of background, I think many people know the climate crisis is real. The 2018 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, referred to as the IPCC report, indicates that global emissions from electricity generation must be reduced by nearly 70% by 2030 as part of the strategy to avoid a more than 1.5 degrees Celsius average warming, including New Jersey's own internal electric generation systems. So that's important for us both to drive down emissions and meet that standard. The 2019 Energy Master Plan put out by Governor Murphy, New Jersey's Energy Master Plan, called for a clean electricity standard to augment or replace the renewable portfolio standard. Clean energy standard of 100% 2035 greenlights more aggressive clean energy requirements for operation by 2023 in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and clean up our air more quickly in the state and in the wider regional grid, right? Because we're part of a whole network of energy. So New Jersey has passed legislation setting the stage for the 100% clean electricity standard through something we refer to as the Clean Renewable Energy Act of 2018. So this chart on the right here demonstrates what our electricity production would look like under this act in meeting a 50% clean renewable electricity standard or goal by 2030. It also shows us what it would look like for the state to meet the 100% goal by 2050, as it currently is listed as in that Energy Master Plan of 2019. And because of these legislative and administrative goalposts, New Jersey has been on a current trajectory to achieve, currently through legislation, 81% clean electricity by 2030. With the signing of Executive Order 315, Governor Murphy set us on a pathway to achieve 85% clean electricity by 2030, slightly higher than we're currently projected, and with the end goal of getting to that 100% clean electricity by 2035. So to sort of simplify this, if no new rules are passed, we will get to 100% clean electricity by 2030 currently. What happens after 2030, that part has been just sort of set to the 2050 goal. The governor's executive order brings that 2050 goal to 2035, inches up by just 4% where we would be in 2030. And then in that next 5 years, we get the other 15% of the job done. And that's what we're hoping to do, is move a currently proposed bill to get us to 100% clean electricity by 2035 as well. And that's sponsored by Senator Bob Smith and Assemblyman Kara Binchek, and it's known as the Clean Energy Act of 2023. And it really is an important extension of the Clean Energy Act of 2018. So with that, let's take a look at alignment to other state goals. As I previously mentioned, prior to Executive Order 315, the state was on a pathway to achieve 81% clean electricity by 2030. This comes from offshore wind, nuclear energy, and solar. The 2018 Clean Energy Act established support for nuclear power plants to receive zero emission credits to help New Jersey meet the targets of the renewable portfolio standards. Our offshore wind goals have increased over time with announcements by the governor. Most recently, Governor Murphy announced our offshore wind goals to reach 11,000 megawatts by 2040. The New Jersey Solar Act of 2021 directed the BPU to double the growth of the existing solar program, incentivizing up to 3,750 megawatts by 2026 and 750 megawatts annually. These goals are laying the groundwork for a cleaner, localized grid and make sure that, as we talk about this, there is actually more money coming into our region and our state to bring these projects closer to fruition. And we'll take a look at that. This has to do with leveraging our federal dollars. State-of-the-art simulation of the regional grid from Princeton University's Zero Lab finds that thanks to the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, there will be abundant, affordable supply of clean electricity from across the region. That'll ensure that New Jersey can reach its goal of 100% clean electricity by 2035 at costs comparable to or less than New Jersey customers have paid in recent years from the time frame of 2019 to 2021. This is based on the research they did at the Zero Lab. All the new carbon-free resources will be able to claim investment tax credits that reduce the upfront cost by 30%, or what they call a production tax credit, which is worth $26 to $31 per megawatt for the first 10 years of the project's operations. The Inflation Reduction Act also provides up to $15 per megawatt to support the operation of existing nuclear plants from 2024 to 2032. And this is going to potentially save New Jersey customers up to $300 million annually in ZEC payments to the state's existing reactors. And that's currently something that we've been doing to subsidize the nuclear industry. Largely due to the Inflation Reduction Act, recent analysis shows regional solar and wind costs are projected to decline substantially from today's low costs. So that's exciting as well. Therefore, increasing New Jersey's clean energy targets would have a negligible cost impact for New Jersey consumers over the coming decade for electric sales that are met by these regional resources. So, that's kind of the effect on your wallet and the money side of this, but let's talk about what it does for our communities. A cleaner grid promises cleaner air to breathe, it promises us cleaner air to drink, and it promises us a cleaner environment to play and work in. And New Jersey's fossil fuel infrastructure is emitting particulate matter in every aspect of it. Ozone precursors and other co-pollutants that are significantly affecting human health. In fact, every single county in New Jersey gets failing grades by the American Lung Association. So this is a real problem, and it's caused in part by what we're doing, and we need to move away from that. These fossil fuel power plants and generators have historically been located in and near disadvantaged urban, indigenous, or rural communities. And as such, these related co-pollutants are disproportionately negatively impacting families and businesses in our communities of color. And that's resulting in higher rates of asthma and other health disparities, including heart disease. By reducing fossil fuel pollution, our clean energy future will help reduce the frequency of diseases that are exacerbated by breathing dirty fossil fuels: cancer, heart attacks, and asthma, the three leading pieces. To most benefit historically disenfranchised communities, our clean electricity standards should be paired with significant complementary policies, such as codifying New Jersey's laudable offshore wind goals, improving our county air monitoring programs, and most importantly, closing down our peaker plants. These are our dirtiest and most expensive power plants that only run when demand is at its highest, and they're in our communities of color. And we must also move forward with programs to help us to electrify the most inefficient households, to reduce the cost of energy for families. So that's kind of a little bit of a background, and I really appreciate your patience to that. But what we're here is the main show to hear from our amazing panelists. So I want to introduce them and give them a chance to talk about why they're here, briefly to do an introduction. So we're honored to have Eric Miller, Barb Blumenthal, and Nicole Miller. I'm going to start out with Nicole Miller, who is principal of M&M Consulting. She serves as the vice chair of New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition and is a communications professional with nearly 2 decades of experience creating targeted publicity and marketing campaigns for a range of clients in private industry and the nonprofit sector. M&M Consulting specializes in media development, digital and print publishing, brand strategy, content creation, and clean energy and sustainability education for businesses and general audience. Nicole Miller is a resident of Newark, a member of the Newark Environmental Commission, advising the mayor and the city council on sustainability issues. She's chair of the Newark Green Team, co-chair of Newark DIG, which stands for Doing Infrastructure Green, and she is dedicated to resilient and sustainable municipal stormwater management. Also serves as co-chair of the New Jersey Waterworks Steering Committee, which is a statewide coalition focused on improving New Jersey's aging water infrastructure. So Nicole, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about why you're here and why this matters?
Oh, well, I'm here because I'm very involved in the communications of this. We've discussed Ed, Barb, Eric, we've all had the conversations about how integral CES is to New Jersey's future, how we're excited about the accelerated timeline, but we also are aware of the pitfalls and the potential for failure if we don't get it right, if we don't really engage people, if we don't educate people, if we don't make sure that we're getting our legislators up to speed and we're making people fully aware of the potential for change, but also the need to have projects that are and programs that are ready to receive funding.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. So next, I'm going to go to Dr. Barbara Blumenthal, who is a research director with New Jersey Conservation Foundation. They advocate for cost-effective clean energy policies to achieve deep decarbonization. Barb is a leading expert in New Jersey's energy systems, and she collaborates with national experts to develop foundational policies, strategies, and regulatory approaches for New Jersey. She has a PhD in management from the University of Michigan and has worked for decades with businesses and nonprofit organizations. Barb, welcome. And if you want to share a few thoughts before we get started.
Sure. So I'm happy to be here. I think for the New Jersey Conservation Foundation, this has been a very important area of work, trying to figure out how to decarbonize electricity. You know, there's 3 pillars of decarbonization, and you have to start by decarbonizing the electric grid. Then when we start using electricity more and more for transportation and for buildings, then we have the 3 pillars, and that accounts for about 90% of all the emissions in New Jersey. So this is a critical area of work. We also spend a lot of time working on the building decarbonization challenges.
Awesome. Happy to have you. I know folks are already getting started. I see a lot of questions in the chat. If you have questions, things that are on your mind, please do share those with us, and we'll do our best to get around to everybody. Eric Miller is the next up here, works to advance clean energy policy in the state of New Jersey. His current areas of focus include energy efficiency and conservation, transportation and renewable energy initiative. Prior to working at NRDC, Eric served as the policy counsel to the Keystone Energy Efficiency Alliance, where he worked on energy efficiency and utility business models to reform policies in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. He holds a bachelor's degree in resource economics from the University of Connecticut and a JD from Villanova University Law School. So Eric, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ed, and everyone else. I'm very excited to be here. I guess Barb is a kindred spirit, because to answer the question, why am I here? At NRDC, I work in the Climate and Clean Energy program, and the North Star of that program is to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And to do that, we do really believe, and we think all of the best science shows, that it is a 3-legged stool, and it does start with the power sector. And once you have a fully decarbonized power sector, it becomes significantly easier to decarbonize the building sector and the transportation sector. And in New Jersey specifically, we think we're in a once-in-a-lifetime moment to move forward very rapidly to the benefit of the state and its citizens. So excited to be here.
Awesome. So the first question that sort of is encompassing a lot of things that are on my mind, and in the clean electricity standard, can you talk a little bit, and maybe Barb, if you want to take this one, you know, how does offshore wind, solar, and other newer technologies fit into that 100% clean electricity standard? And then, you know, if other folks want to jump in, and I don't know, Barb, you may have a slide on this or not, if we can go to that. I'm not sure if Barb has a tendency to tell the story with pictures, which is really helpful for all of us. So I'm just guessing, knowing my experience.
I think Ed had a slide earlier that shows the growth of clean energy, that so somebody can bring up that slide, not the EMP slide, but the earlier slide. So yes, definitely the clean resources that are contemplated are certainly, so that one's great, thank you. solar and wind are clearly clean technologies. For the purposes of a clean electricity standard, it's about greenhouse gas emissions. And so you're looking for technologies that replace fossil fuels, which have substantial greenhouse gas emissions, with something that has zero or close to zero. And so nuclear power is another resource that displaces a coal plant or a gas plant. In the future, and those three are going to drive the growth of clean electricity over the next decade. We're part of a regional grid, and there's a long ways to go in our grid. There's not a high penetration yet of solar and wind, but because of the IRA, we're expecting that to almost quadruple by 2030, the amount of solar and wind that's deployed. So we're going to see a very different grid by 2030, and New Jersey is part of that. In the future, so, there's some very sophisticated modeling that we keep referring to. There's many different places that do the same type of modeling and come to the same type of conclusions about how decarbonization of electricity is going to happen. And they all are in complete agreement that the next decade, it's about deploying massive amounts of solar and wind, massive. So we can't be limited by, like small little targets for certain types of resources. This has got to be all of the above. Everything that we can get done in our region in the next decade is critically important. Then we get to a point by about 2040, when there's a high 2030, 2035, 2040, there's going to be a lot of renewables. And if nuclear generation is able to stay online, it will have a substantially cleaner grid. And then we start running into those issues that people always ask about, which is how are we going to keep the lights on when we have this variable resource? And that's where new kinds of clean technologies will play a role. We don't have to name them now, because whatever we guess is our most favorite or our least favorite clean resource that'll be there by 2040, we're going to be wrong. So there's been guesses for years. The guesses 5 years ago are already proving wrong. So there's a list of possible clean technologies that'll be available to provide that. We need that other resource, which is we call clean firm, something that's dispatchable, that's always available, that will be backing up and supplementing solar and wind to keep the lights on. It's just it becomes a reliability resource, and initially it'll be gas. Gas is going to continue to play that role over the next decade or longer, supplementing solar and wind. And at some point, we need a cleaner technology to come along to substitute for the role that gas plays. Could be long duration storage, could be many different types of storage. Some of them we don't even think about. Could be something like green hydrogen, could be something else. So
one of the questions we got, Doug asked, and maybe this, you want to answer this, Barb, or someone else. Doug asked, why is nuclear, and you mentioned this, why is nuclear considered clean energy given all the risks from plants, plus the issues with waste disposal?
I'll start, maybe Eric can jump in, or Nicole, but we're not saying this is like a perfect technology. These are not, none of these are perfect. None of these are without some kind of drawbacks. But if we want to decarbonize, we have to make choices, and we have keep our eye on the prize. The North Star is, are we decarbonizing? Are we removing greenhouse gas emissions from the grid? Just as an example, I think somebody brought up what happened in Germany. They shut down nuclear plants, had a policy. Before the Ukraine war started, they already had this policy in place. And the result has been, given that they can't get much gas, coal plants have come back and their emissions have gone up. And that policy, a lot of people in Europe, other countries, have been critical of Germany can get off nuclear plants sooner or later, but by doing it sooner, they increased emissions. So we have to be very, very careful. Nuclear plants play a big role, not just in New Jersey, but in our regional grid. And if they all shut down, I think I saw data that emissions in New Jersey will go up by 42% by 2030 without nuclear plants. So.
I think just to add to what Barb is saying as well, if you look at all of the projections, we're not adding new nuclear. So nuclear is at about 40% right now, and that's projected to, that amount is projected to stay, and our reliance on nuclear will decrease as we add other sources of energy. So I too was very skeptical of including nuclear as an acceptable option, but really I did a lot of research into it. So I really started listening to people and asking questions and getting into the meat of it. And the fact that nuclear is very expensive to produce at this point is really the biggest roadblock for why we don't have more of it. Of all of the technologies, it's safe. It just when things go wrong, they go spectacularly wrong. But truthfully, when you look at the health ramifications of the technologies that we have, that we rely on every day, that we have burning in our homes, where many more people are killed by fossil fuels than they are by nuclear power. And that doesn't mean that nuclear is an ideal solution, like Barb mentioned. However, we do want to look at things on an even playing field, as opposed to looking at things from a sensationalist point of view. But I agree that nuclear isn't ideal, but it's not increasing, but we are relying on it as an opposition to, as an alternative to fossil fuels.
And I think one thing it's important to mention, Eric, I'm going to go to you in a second, but as a narrator or whatever I am, moderator, I'll take a prerogative for a second. 90% of America's demand for electricity by 2050, even increasing all the electrification for cars and everything else, can be powered by offshore wind alone. So we're talking about, someone asked a question about nuclear, but the solutions and the cost consideration, Nicole, you got me thinking about this. That's going to be a big factor. Nuclear is expensive for the reasons that Doug mentioned. You know, the waste issues, the safety issues, et cetera. And you know, we'll see how that plays out. The other question before I go to you, Eric, you probably want to say something about nuclear, maybe even the mix. I want to thank Susan, who said right now solar is only for those who can afford it. Businesses too, if it's feasible. And you know, community solar is, when we say solar, we're talking about community solar, which is solar that can be put on rooftops of, you know, commercial buildings, these box stores, warehouses, et cetera, for folks that can't put it on their own roof, they can't afford to, or they don't have control of their roof. That is also part of it. And it comes at a discount. You can save up to 25, sometimes 35%, usually around 15 or 20 off your traditional electricity to sign up for community solar. And it's not a scam. I will tell you that. You want to be a good shopper, but community solar is real. You don't have to put panels on your house. Someone else is doing that, and you're subscribing and taking advantage and a beneficiary. So when we're saying solar, we are talking about that. So Susan, thanks for that plug. So Eric, the mix, nuclear energy, community solar, softball right to you.
Well, yeah, I think that obviously our goals will be met by a mix of energy. And one of the things that, you know, the state of New Jersey is working on is not necessarily choosing winners and losers, but deciding to invest extra dollars where we think it's really important. And community solar is one of those investments that directly benefits customers who wouldn't otherwise be able to have lower energy bills or access to solar. So programs like that are, you know, not exactly within this legislation, but work close by to it, are really important. And our hope is this legislation is flexible enough to make sure we achieve 100% clean electricity target, even if we're not exactly sure what the perfect mix is. You know, we can only project. If any of us on this panel or in the audience could perfectly say what the future was in 2035, we would all be rich, and I would be doing this from my yacht. And the one point on nuclear, I think, you know, Barb and Nicole both, I agree with their points 100%. And the other piece I just want to really put into focus is The amount of energy or electricity that the nuclear fleet in New Jersey makes is massive. 40% today. If we hit the switch tomorrow and they went off, we'd buy our power from Pennsylvania and Ohio and other states further to the west that have much dirtier energy producing than we do. And I guess the biggest example of why clean energy and a regional approach to it is so important is the Homer City Power Plant in Pennsylvania, a 1900 megawatt coal plant, just announced it was shutting down. It's another in a string of massive Pennsylvania coal plants that have gone down. And if you've ever seen them in person, they are the largest polluting smokestacks I've ever seen and tower over anything we've ever had in New Jersey. And that's the kind of plants that are going offline when we pursue this type of policy.
And this policy that we're talking about is the one that was proposed by Senator Smith and Assemblyman Karabinchak. It's the 100% clean electricity standard. It's technology agnostic. And that's why we're saying we'll leave it up to sort of these pieces. Is that correct to summarize, Eric?
I think that's absolutely correct. None of us have a crystal ball, but we can
Yes,
push
that's
in the
in the
right
current
direction.
state. Look, legislation kind of is a work in progress, right? But in its current state, it's just we need to get there. The details will be worked out, and that's why you're hearing some of this, like the different technologies described. One technology, and it came up here in a couple different ways, has to do with what is now considered renewable energy in New Jersey, class 2 renewables, which include like other things like biofuels, switchgrass, taking things and digesting them and making them into a fuel. And also another category, which currently gets a renewable energy incentive. We're literally paying into it, which is incineration. We burn trash and the dirty air pollutes communities. These communities are all communities of color, already overburdened with lots of pollution. Barb, talk about what the clean electricity standard means for incineration. And does that belong in the definition? Incineration itself.
Right. Currently, there's legislation, the existing law, which happened a long time ago, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, a class 2 wreck in New Jersey was defined to include incineration. So there's a particular type of credit. It's not the same as what we're talking about. We're talking about what we call class 1 wrecks here, all of these technologies, but a special class 2 credit was created and incineration qualifies for that. So that's existing law. So this work has nothing to do with class 2 resources. It doesn't consider it clean energy. It's not a clean energy resource. It would never qualify as a class 1 resource, would never qualify for a clean energy credit. So separately, there's work to be done to go back to that system of giving credits for incineration and changing that law. But that's a different area of law than the clean energy standard is creating.
And Nicole, I saw your head shaking yes. So
Yeah, because I mean, Barb has Barb's answer and Nicole has Nicole's answer. It's not necessarily the same vibe, right? But as a resident of a city with an incinerator in it, Covanta incinerator, I live in the West Ward, but down in the East Ward of Newark, like people are dealing with not just the expense of having an incinerator, they're not dealing with just the smells, they're not dealing with just the emissions that might come from it, but they're dealing with the actual particulate matter, they're dealing with the increased trucks, they're dealing with the lived reality of having an incinerator in their backyard. And for this trouble, the state of New Jersey is not getting more clean energy, right? Like they're not getting a lot of clean energy out of these trash burning facilities. They're expensive, and that's not to say that what do they call them? Landfills are better. Absolutely not. What we need are real waste policies to reduce waste, to increase organics recycling, to reduce our to decrease our reliance on disposable culture. We really need a full and holistic rethinking of how we deal with trash, not just burning it and thinking it goes away, because it doesn't. It goes into people's lungs.
Can we stick with you, Nicole? Talk to me about and share with folks the job opportunities as they relate to the clean energy economy and some of these burgeoning opportunities.
Well, it's just nothing but jobs as far as the eye can see, actually, because there's so much work to be done. All the things that we've been talking about are incredibly job intensive, and they're very much focused here within the state. So there's, of course, out of state opportunities. Some energy is cheaper outside of state. Those things are going to be helping us make this mix affordable. But when we're looking at jobs, our work with our union and our labor partners, they're really looking at how we can maintain in-house jobs. And first of all, this process is a 15-year transition off of fossil fuel energy. So we're not talking about people's plants being shut down tomorrow and them losing their job. So they have 15 years for retraining, for finding a new industry, or for retiring. So if it was me, for example, in 15 years, I'm looking at retirement. I'm not, hopefully, how old am I? Yeah, I'm looking at retirement. I'm not, starting this. So the people who are going to be in the middle of their professions for these jobs are now in high school or middle school. So those are the jobs that we should be training up. And so we want to make sure that there's a proper pipeline. Work is going to come from increasing our in-state renewables, including rooftop and community solar, our offshore wind, green hydrogen fuel cells, or whatever that fill-in stable fuel opportunity might be. And then when all the modeling shows that for our 100 by 2035, when we focus on low cost resources, we're talking about 24,000 jobs in 2035, 24,000. And 10,000 of those will be for large solar installations, 7,000 for offshore wind. And those are just for what we have projected, not necessarily for what we don't know will be projected in the future. And we're talking about union jobs for maintaining nuclear power plants. We're talking about jobs for energy efficiency programs, installing EV and other kinds of devices. There's a lot of work to be done, and that work needs to happen here in New Jersey.
And it is the fastest growing sector of our economy, our clean energy jobs. That's energy efficiency, that's moving into solar and now wind. New Jersey has the wind port, which we're going to be manufacturing every aspect of the wind here in our state. Those are jobs that can't be outsourced, which is awesome. As we're talking a little bit about energy efficiency and the jobs that are there, as we know, and I can never say this enough, the cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. And that's the energy you save through energy efficiency. If you have rattling doors and windows, if you have uninsulated walls, you are literally throwing money out the window. And so upgrading your home to be more energy efficient is critical. And so Mike asked this question: what proposals are being offered to substantially reduce New Jersey's electricity demand by 2030? And so what comes to mind for me is energy efficiency. Other thoughts from folks? Or you want to add anything on that? How important that is?
Energy, well, so I think to broaden your answer a little bit, energy efficiency is full stop the answer, but what are the policies being done? I commend the governor's office for their executive order with building electrification, prioritizing building electrification, 400,000 homes, 20,000 businesses by 2030, which is very ambitious, but we can absolutely do this. Making sure people are aware of opportunities, increasing consumer choice, putting those federal dollars that we're going to get that you talked about earlier, Ed, putting those to work. And then also, of course, for the programs for people who are vulnerable, economically vulnerable, making our programs like Comfort Partners program right now, which is an energy efficiency program, but does not also prioritize electrification. This is massively important. These are the kinds of changes that our state needs to make. Some of them are subtle, but they are what will make the difference between an electric and a non-electric future.
And I think one of the pieces too, Alex asked about equity. What additional policies do we need to pass? Which, I touched on some of those. One of the pieces around, energy efficiency equity is, making sure those programs are accessible to low and moderate income families. That is the targeted demographic, but sometimes these programs in practice don't play out like they are on paper. I will just tell my experience. I did a insulation project on my home, and I had to upfront all the money. Well, I was in a position to do that, but that's not going to work for a lot of folks. And that's not really how the program was designed, but it's a loophole that's been created by the energy efficiency industry, so they don't have to upfront the money. We need to be vigilant in the implementation and how we're structuring these programs, that they are accessible, because there's no doubt money being thrown away in the energy efficiency space. And that's a challenge. A lot of great questions. This is an amazing group. I want to try to get to them all. I'm trying to put them together. Hopefully I make it look seamless. So one of the questions really, we're talking about energy efficiency. I talked about cost. I talked about the cheapest thing you can do is not use energy, and that's, insulate, weatherize. But cost comes up. People are worried that renewable energy, clean energy, is going to cost more, and that ultimately is a reason not to do it. What can we expect as we go in the 100% clean electricity standard about how that's going to affect our wallets? Barb, you're kind of smirking, so I'm going to go to you and then Eric. I smirk before unmuting. So
Eric can go first.
Okay, Eric first. Go ahead, Eric.
All right, I'm happy to
Bring up
do
the
so.
slide.
Yeah, I'll let Barb dive into the details, but Ed, at the beginning of your presentation, you really did cover a big part of it, which is the Inflation Reduction Act is a once in a generation opportunity to invest in these technologies much more cheaply than we used to. And even before the Inflation Reduction Act, we all know that costs were falling rapidly, both for wind and solar at all levels, smaller, bigger, but especially at the large scale. And even with COVID and supply chain issues, 2023 marked the year where large scale renewables were significantly cheaper than things like coal or older fossil fuel plants. So we're already there in terms of getting to cost parity on some of the worst resources. Now it's about keeping going. And what that looks like for a consumer, I will let Barb jump into because I know she has a good answer.
So we have a slide at the end of the presentation. So I haven't seen many questions in the chat about our cost, what's the impact on cost. What I'm seeing a lot of is, why don't we do more of this or more of that? And sometimes the answer is because of cost. That's why we don't do more of something. So I'm going to share some inconvenient facts, because it's not the world I would wish that we lived in, but it just happens to be the world we are living in New Jersey. There's some places in the US where solar resources can be developed on rooftops for free. There's no state incentives, there's nothing. It's just economic. Homeowners can get a rapid payback. It works, it makes sense. We're not in one of those places. Same thing with wind. There are a lot of places in the US that have abundant wind. This country has the best wind resources, and the southwest part of the US has the best solar resources of anywhere on the planet. So we're very fortunate. We live in the Northeast where we don't actually have any onshore wind. We're going to develop offshore wind, but solar in New Jersey, there's two different types, and the economics couldn't be more different. When you develop something, a larger scale development, we're expecting it to come in. We're just starting a competitive bidding process. So a lot of work has happened over the last 4 years to change the way we develop solar programs to bring down the cost to ratepayers. So this competitive large-scale solar development is new. It's just getting started. We're going to see what the first bids are in the next month or so. But they're expecting in this chart for large scale solar to come in around this green box about maybe $40 or so is what they're expecting. And this is net of some of the economic benefits. So this is actually including some economic benefits. Offshore wind is more expensive. So do you see there's the solar, grid supply solar, offshore wind. Oh, by the way, nuclear costs about $10, $12 per megawatt hour. So hopefully the large scale solar will come in around 40 on average. Offshore wind is about 60-ish on average. Rooftop solar incentives, even net of some of the economic benefits, is with net metering, it's just the most expensive resource we have. I wish it weren't true. I wish we could just develop rooftop solar on every single person's house. But if we did, we would see a major impact on electric rates. We already see an impact on electric rates from rooftop, behind the meter rooftop solar. So it's a question of how much can we do? How much can we afford to do of this mix of resources? So when we talked about the modeling of 100% clean electricity that we just shared, selected the lower cost resources. It keeps the nuclear, adds a lot more large scale solar, and adds this thing as regional. In the region, we can get solar, wind, regional solar and wind for $5 to $10, where we're paying a couple $100 for in-state rooftop solar. So we want some of this in the mix. We want some of these other low-cost resources, and we can have some higher cost resources. But if we dominated with high-cost resources, we would be looking at very different electric bills, and that has equity implications. And more important, equally important, it has implications for electrification. If we're trying to get people to switch to electric appliances in their homes at today's gas and electric rates, you save money by doing that. If we let electric rates double in New Jersey, that wouldn't be true. So we would have a very difficult time. And there's far more greenhouse gas emissions in the building sector than there are in the electric sector. So we have to be really smart about what mix of resources are going to get us the most greenhouse gas emissions reductions at a cost that doesn't impede decarbonization of transportation and building.
No, thank you for that. And the details too on the cost per technology, which shift over time. We see some of the costs for, when it's like the first iPhone, they were high and then they sort of drop over time. Nicole, I want you to jump in because I see you unmuted, but also someone's asking about what the definition is of clean firm. And if there's an example. So we'll come back to that. Nicole, jump in with this question about
cost. Just still on costs, and I feel like we're going to talk a little bit more about community solar, but I see there's some robust community solar conversation happening in the chat there. And to Barb's point, community solar is coming in roughly like $90 a megawatt hour, and which is expensive, but it's so much cheaper than a lot of our rooftop solar. And also, I think I saw in the chat, why aren't we mandating rooftop solar be put on every warehouse? Well, New Jerseyans don't really like mandates, so they don't like being told what to do. So if we can get these communities to, and we just now, we have a straw proposal now for a permanent community solar process and increasing that opportunity for people who live in homes whose roofs are not accessible, or for people who don't own their rooftop, and lots of other opportunities. I think I saw Isabel put in the chat about a community solar webinar that NJLCV is going to be doing. Hopefully people will be paying attention to that and really letting people let their neighbors and friends know that this is an opportunity that we have to bring the cost down. The more of these that we have sort of distributed across, the more we have an opportunity to use them to help secure our grid, to help make things a little bit more accessible and equitable for people.
really important points. If you can join our webinar on community solar and learn more, we need your help. New Jerseyans have been hit by all kinds of stuff because our power supply to our home, the delivery and the production have been delinked through decoupling. And because of that, people are always trying to sell you a new source of energy, even though your utility's bringing it to you. And then when they hear about community solar, they can actually save money. Like, they don't believe it. So we need you to learn as much as you can and really help share with your neighbors and friends. The best endorsement of a product, evaluation is word of mouth. Sign up yourself, go through the process so you can coach them through it. I've done it. It's very personal. You got to like put in financial information and things. And, you know, there's a lot of reasons why folks might not do it. So join our webinar to learn more. We're not going to cover it all here. There's a link in the chat where you can sign up and, you know, and learn more about that. So Michael asked this question about Clean Firm. Can you describe more in detail what Clean Firm is and how it's used? Because that's been tossed around. Eric, do you want to take a stab at that or go back to Barb?
I'm happy to take the stab if Barb wants to take over, but you know, in its most simple form, one of the really valuable things, and I don't like saying this, that, for instance, a modern gas turbine provides is that you can just call the plant operator, probably just to get a message, and they can spin the plant up and provide however many megawatts they're built for. Say it's 200 megawatts or something. That's valuable to be able to plug that hole if we have it in terms of supply and demand and be able to come on whenever we need it. So when we say firm, we mean something that is dispatchable. When I pick up the phone and call it, we know it can run when we need it. So Clean Firm is, how do we move forward with technologies that can act the same way? So we need some clean power right now. Maybe it's 1 in the morning or 5 in the afternoon. It's extra hot out. You can flip the switch and have it run. I think the easiest thing that comes to mind are batteries, right? If you have a huge battery bank that's connected to a substation, you can dispatch that power when you need it. But there's a lot of other technologies being developed. I'm happy, Barb, if you want to jump in there.
I think that's good for now. We have to do speed.
Okay.
There are a massive amount of questions and they're all great. These are great. Thank you guys so much. And I'm glad we had 45 minutes of questions, honestly, like sort of how this worked out. So to the organizers, all of you, you know, thank you. So there's one quick question that I want to take, which is from Jay. And Jay asks, are there things like trash to energy and burning biomass that are considered green energy or clean energy? And then from there, I want to pivot to a question from similar questions from Keith and Jill, which I think I can weave these together. How is New Jersey going to meet its 2035 goals when there are several fossil fuel projects going forward in the state, like the Woodbridge Power Plant, the Passaic Valley Sewage Commission power plant, the Wantage and West Milford compressors and power plants? And so, you know, I think those are important. So I'm going to take a stab at the biomass sort of issue. We're talking today about clean energy. The words green or whatever, like, I think that's for another discussion. So, but Jay, you raise a really good point. The current renewable portfolio standard that we're under, the one that gets us to that 81%, right? That, with the current laws, that includes trash incineration, biogas, biofuels, et cetera, switchgrass, all these things. There's categories of them. A clean electricity standard, if it's done right, and we have some work to do on the definition, should not. Okay, so renewable energy in New Jersey is dirty. If you breathed it, you would cough, you could get sick. Clean energy, by our definition in this group, is not going to produce those harmful emissions. That does not mean all these technologies don't have impacts, but that's really what we're coming down to. And as we move to this clean energy economy, if the CES for 2035, Clean Energy Standard by 2035 were happening, what would it mean for these fossil fuel plants? And juxtapose, what do these fossil fuel projects mean to the clean energy transition and the work that we need to do to meet the IPCC goals? Anyone want to talk a little bit about that?
So one of the themes I'm getting from questions is a clean clean electricity standard isn't a magic bullet. It doesn't solve every problem. It's like a pillar. It's an important policy tool that can actually do a lot more than what we've even talked about tonight. But there are complementary things that have to happen in order for us to really decarbonize without creating leakage or doing something like pushing our emissions into another state. There's a so when you build, so I think Mike Winka answered this in the chat. He gave one explanation. If you build a new gas plant today, if there's no more load, if there's no more demand for electricity, then that plant doesn't run. Like, just because there's a new facility, a new generation, doesn't mean it's going to have, it has to displace something else. So a new gas plant displaces an older gas plant because the new one would be more efficient and a lower cost, and the old one would have more emissions and be higher cost. So it was going to place some other fossil fuel facility. Solar and wind, because when it's time to dispatch electricity, the grid operator starts with the zero cost resources. Solar and wind always come first, and the nuclear plants bid at zero as well. So they go first. We use all of the clean resources that are available, and then you start adding in coal plants and gas plants. So an additional gas plant doesn't necessarily increase any emissions, it pushes something else out. Additional solar and wind always pushes fossil fuels out, always. So every single megawatt hour of new clean technology reduces how often a gas plant is currently running. So it doesn't mean that we don't need strategies to stop dumb things from happening and stop the development of a facility that isn't needed, but it doesn't necessarily have that impact on emissions.
And we have 2 minutes and a lot of other questions. So what I will say is many of us are working very hard against and to oppose at every turn these new fossil fuel infrastructure projects, the power plants, the pipelines, the compressor stations. The fugitive emissions from compressor stations alone are massive. This infrastructure leaks. And so again, this is one piece of how we get the electricity we're using to be cleaner. Doesn't necessarily deal with all the problems. And with time, with more electricity online from clean sources, demand will drop, right? Particularly if it's a law, right? Because we know where we're going. Businesses love predictable and reliable trajectories. And by passing this legislation, we'll be on our way to making sure these other projects aren't even on the table at all. We're still in the fights. We're all in it together. We only have like a minute left. I do want to ask some more questions, but the big question that comes up is like, what can people do to help us? Because we're going to need help. Someone said in the chat, like, this is going to be hard. It is going to be hard. You're changing a whole way of doing business. And with that, some people hate change, but it's critical. You know, if you had cancer because of a smokestack, you want the change we're talking about, right? If you want cheaper energy because you're using less, you want the change we're talking about because of energy efficiency and electrification. So that's what's at stake. We want you to get involved. So if someone can put up a chat about how to join our email list, and we'll follow up with everyone who joined as well with our contact information. We need you in this fight. We need you to bring your friends and neighbors. If you're in an environmental commission, if you're part of another organization, talk about this piece of legislation. We have a small window in the next about till January, when the new legislature comes in, to get this legislation across the finish line, to make the most aggressive, cleanest standard in America a reality. And we're close. We have the bill, we have the governor's commitment, but we got to do the hard work of moving it through the process. And today's whole thing was just answering your questions. There's more. I mean, we didn't get to all of them. There's things about resource extraction. I'm sorry we didn't get to it. Cars, we didn't even talk about cars, but we did a lot. So thank you for your thoughtful responses, for the chat, for our experts, Nicole, Barb, Eric, for your work, other advocates that are on the line, to the folks in my office at New Jersey LCV, Isabel, who shepherded this, along with Rebecca, Catherine, and Allison. Amazing work, everyone. Clearly, we have to come back. We've got more to talk about, but we want you in the fight with us. We want you learning along with us. We want you to help educate your community. So please do get involved. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I guess until we come back again on this same bat channel, have a great day and enjoy yourselves. Thanks for being interested in clean energy.